There are moments when silence reveals more than the most carefully chosen words. In relationships, in friendships, even in fleeting encounters, pauses often carry a weight that language cannot hold. Words can disguise, distract, or distort, but silence has no disguise. It is raw, unedited, and deeply telling. The way someone pauses before answering, the absence of a response where once there was eagerness, or the quiet that fills a room after truth has been spoken, each of these silences reflects an emotional reality. They become mirrors, showing what is hidden beneath the surface. Carl Jung suggested that the unconscious communicates in symbols and subtleties rather than direct statements. Silence functions in much the same way. It connects not only to the personal unconscious, but also to the collective unconscious, that deep layer of shared human truth. What is unsaid often reveals more than what is said because it bypasses the masks of the ego. When someone cannot put their feelings into words, silence becomes the vessel that carries the truth. The pause, the gap, the withheld explanation, all of these moments are archetypal in nature, echoing humanity's universal fear of emptiness and simultaneous longing for connection. Psychologically, silence unsettles because it forces presence. In the absence of words, we cannot hide behind narratives or defenses. We are confronted with what is really happening: disinterest, love, resentment, attraction, distance. For some, this confrontation feels unbearable, which is why they rush to fill the air with explanations. But for those who dare to observe, silence becomes revelation. It exposes intentions, motives, and emotions that otherwise would remain obscured. The truth in silence is not shouted, but it is felt. And often, it is impossible to deny. Everyday life offers countless examples. A partner who stops sharing his daily stories no longer communicates affection through silence, but detachment. A friend who listens without interruption offers presence more powerful than empty reassurances. A pause before answering a question may reveal hesitation, doubt, or even dishonesty. Silence at the dinner table may reflect comfort or avoidance. Each context matters, but what remains constant is that silence cannot be faked for long. It will always show where words cannot reach. The power of silence lies in what emerges within its space. In those quiet gaps, intuition grows sharper. A woman senses disinterest without needing to be told. She feels affection in a gaze without hearing declarations. She notices when someone's pause reflects conflict they cannot articulate. In silence, she discovers that her body recognizes truth before her mind admits it. The emptiness is not empty at all. It is filled with signals waiting to be read. Jung would argue that silence bridges the conscious and unconscious. It is in the gap between words that deeper truths rise. Just as dreams use images instead of direct explanations, silence uses absence to point toward presence. The pause forces both individuals to step into an archetypal space, the realm of mystery, of shadow, of the unknown. This is why silence so often feels heavy. It carries more than what is heard. It carries what is hidden. Ultimately, silence is not the absence of communication, but its most honest form. When words cease, authenticity begins to surface. To observe silence is to observe the soul stripped of defense. It is to see what lies beneath rehearsed performances and polite gestures. For the woman who dares to trust her perception, silence becomes a teacher. It tells her when she is valued, when she is ignored, when love still flows, and when it has dried up. In these revelations, silence speaks louder than the most beautiful words could ever hope to. There are different languages within silence, and learning to distinguish them is one of the most powerful emotional skills a woman can develop. Not every quiet moment carries the same meaning. At times, silence brings intimacy. The warmth of sitting side by side without pressure to speak, the comfort of a shared glance that needs no explanation. the stillness of two souls who can rest in each other's presence. But there are other silences that feel heavy, cold, and distancing. This kind of quiet does not unite but separates. It is not presence, but absence. Knowing the difference is essential because misreading silence can either deepen love or prolong disconnection. Carl Jung would say that the body often knows before the mind is ready to name the truth. The silence of presence feels grounding. The body relaxes, the atmosphere feels calm, and the heart senses connection even without words. The silence of distance, on the other hand, triggers unease. The stomach tightens, the breath feels shallow, and an invisible wall begins to form between two people. This embodied wisdom is part of the archetype of the guardian, the inner protector that senses danger before it becomes explicit. By listening to these signals, a woman honors her own perception rather than dismissing it in the hope of keeping peace. The psychological impact of discerning these silences is profound. A woman who can tell the difference does not waste her energy begging for attention when silence already reveals disinterest. Nor does she sabotage moments of intimacy by fearing quietness that is, in truth, connection. She learns to let presence be enough when it is genuine, and to walk away when quietness becomes a mask for neglect. This discernment preserves her energy and strengthens her dignity because she no longer depends on words alone to confirm what her intuition already knows. Examples from daily life make this distinction clear. Sitting in silence on a car ride, one woman feels safe, her partner's hand resting gently in hers. This is intimacy without words. Another, sharing a meal, feels his distant eyes and distracted posture. This is absence disguised as quiet. One friend listens silently with warmth, while another listens silently with judgment. The difference lies not in the lack of speech, but in the energy carried through the pause. Silence itself is neutral. It is the intention behind it that defines whether it nurtures or erodes. When silence becomes avoidance, it begins to corrode connection. What could have been resolved through honesty transforms into evasion. The absence of words no longer protects the bond, but slowly weakens it. Yet when silence is sacred, it builds trust. Two people who can sit together without performance reveal a depth that words often obscure. Silence, then, becomes both a test and a revelation, the mirror reflecting whether the relationship rests on presence or on absence. Jungian psychology reminds us that silence links directly to the unconscious. What cannot be expressed in words will find its way into gestures, pauses, and atmospheres. The silence of presence is full, charged with authenticity. The silence of absence is hollow, echoing with what is denied. A woman who learns to read these distinctions sees not just what is spoken, but what is truly lived. Ultimately, silence can either be the bridge that deepens intimacy or the wall that signals disconnection. The difference lies in the feeling it evokes in the body and soul. To discern this is to honor the guardian within, the archetype that protects dignity and truth. And when she chooses to trust these signals, a woman steps into clarity. She no longer fears silence because she knows how to read its language. Instead, she lets it guide her, showing her when to stay in presence and when to walk away from absence. There is a unique magnetism in a woman who does not fear silence. In a culture that glorifies noise, speed, and constant affirmation, her calm restraint becomes striking. She does not rush to fill every pause with words, nor does she scatter her energy in explanations meant to justify her worth. Instead, she allows space to exist and trusts that her presence is enough. This quiet composure communicates confidence in a way that words cannot. By not fearing silence, she demonstrates that she belongs fully to herself, and this self-possession naturally inspires both respect and attraction. Carl Jung wrote that individuation requires integration, the capacity to hold tension without collapsing into insecurity. A woman who embraces silence embodies this integration. She does not interpret pauses as rejection or emptiness, but as opportunities for clarity and depth. Her calm reveals that she has faced her own shadows, her own fears of abandonment or invisibility, and has learned not to be undone by them. This inner reconciliation creates a serenity that others instinctively feel. Silence in her hands is not a void, but a canvas for authenticity. The psychological power of this is profound. Many people fear silence because it forces them to confront themselves. But the woman who rests in it communicates that she has nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to chase. This fearlessness makes her presence magnetic. Men in particular sense the difference. She does not demand their constant attention, nor does she collapse without it. Her steadiness becomes a filter, attracting only those capable of meeting her immaturity, while quietly discouraging those seeking control or validation at her expense. Examples from daily life reveal this magnetism clearly. A woman listens without rushing to reply, and her thoughtful silence makes her words later feel more powerful. Another declines to argue in the face of provocation, and her quiet dignity disarms what anger could not. Another chooses to remain still in moments when others scramble to prove themselves, and her calm presence becomes the most commanding in the room. In each case, it is not what she says, but what she withholds that carries weight. This posture aligns deeply with the archetype of the queen. The queen does not need to explain her authority. Her presence is its own declaration. She embodies centrality, the ability to stand in her own truth without shrinking or pleading. Her silence is not passivity, but sovereignty. When she speaks less, her words matter more. When she pauses, her stillness commands attention. People feel the gravity of her presence, not because she strives for it, but because she has mastered the art of conserving her energy. The paradox is that the less she tries to prove, the more convincing she becomes. Others may scatter words in an attempt to impress, but her restraint communicates depth. While noise fades, silence lingers. It leaves space for others to reflect, to lean in, to listen more carefully. Her quiet confidence becomes unforgettable, precisely because it is so rare. In a world of constant noise, she embodies the strength of stillness. Ultimately, the woman who embraces silence as an ally discovers clarity. She learns that she does not need to exhaust herself to be respected or loved. By protecting her energy and trusting her presence, she creates an aura that no performance can replicate. This is why her silence speaks louder than arguments, louder than justification, louder than even the most beautiful words. It is not emptiness. It is authority expressed in its purest form, and that is what makes her irresistible. There are moments when silence becomes not just presence, but resistance. To refuse to engage in arguments that lead nowhere is itself a powerful statement. A woman who has cultivated quiet confidence knows that not every battle deserves her voice, and not every provocation requires her reaction. By remaining silent, she withholds the very energy that fuels conflict. What others may interpret as weakness is in truth maturity. For her, silence is not surrender, it is a boundary. It says, "I will not waste my dignity where there is no respect." This ability to resist through quietness protects both her peace and her power. Carl Jung described containment as a crucial element of individuation. Containment does not mean suppression, but the ability to hold emotions without letting them spill into destruction. The woman who embraces silence as resistance embodies this principle. She does not deny her feelings. She masters them. Her silence becomes a container that transforms anger into clarity, disappointment into strength. By choosing not to react, she preserves her center rather than scattering it. This makes her presence feel unshakable. even in the face of conflict. The psychological effect of this choice is profound. When she refuses to be drawn into useless disputes, she breaks cycles of manipulation and emotional exhaustion. Her silence exposes those who thrive on drama because without her reaction, their power diminishes. Instead of being dragged into the noise of others, she chooses the calm rhythm of her own voice, even when that voice is expressed as quiet. Over time, she learns that silence is not absence, but an active decision to remain loyal to herself rather than to chaos. Examples from real life make this dynamic clear. A woman facing harsh criticism decides not to defend herself endlessly, and her silence unsettles those expecting her collapse. Another, confronted with dismissive comments, responds only with a calm gaze, her dignity intact. Another, when drawn into manipulative games, simply refuses to participate, walking away without explanation. In each case, her silence does not weaken her presence, it heightens it. She leaves others to wrestle with their own noise while she preserves her own peace. This way of being aligns with the archetype of the guardian. The guardian protects not by building walls of hostility, but by guarding the sacred space of her energy. Silence in this archetype becomes her shield. It deflects attacks without diminishing her compassion, and it preserves her strength for moments that truly matter. Those who seek to provoke her learn quickly that her quietness is not compliance, but clarity. And in this clarity, her dignity becomes undeniable. The paradox is striking. In a world that equates victory with the loudest argument, her refusal to engage appears radical. Yet the silence she chooses often carries more weight than words ever could. It communicates self-possession, restraint, and wisdom. Others may forget her words, but they will never forget the power of her silence. By not reacting, she teaches a profound lesson, that peace itself can be a form of resistance, and dignity the ultimate form of victory. Ultimately, silence as resistance is not about withdrawing from life, but about engaging with it more consciously. It is the choice to spend energy where it nourishes rather than where it is wasted. It is the ability to walk away from noise and remain anchored in authenticity. And in doing so, the woman discovers that her silence does not erase her presence. It amplifies it. What she withholds becomes more powerful than what others shout. Her pause, her restraint, her refusal to engage in futility, all of these make her silence the loudest statement in the room. There is a silence that heals, one that transforms from resistance into intimacy. When shared with the right person, silence becomes a language of love in itself. Two people can sit together without words and still feel profoundly connected, because the bond does not need constant proof. In these moments, silence is not emptiness, it is fullness. It communicates safety, trust, and presence. The absence of speech does not signal absence of care, it becomes the purest form of it. This kind of silence reveals that love, when true, does not demand performance, but rests naturally in being. Carl Jung described symbols as carriers of truths too deep for direct expression. Silence, in this sense, is symbolic. It represents the union of two souls beyond the limits of words. What cannot be spoken is felt, and what is felt carries more weight than language could. In the Jungian view, this is a glimpse of the self, the integrated whole that transcends opposites. When silence unites two people, they enter a space where the conscious and unconscious meet, and connection is experienced at its deepest level. The psychological effect of this silence is profound. To share quietness without anxiety means that both individuals feel secure enough to exist as they are. They do not fear being misunderstood because presence itself is the message. They do not rush to fill the air because the bond has no void that needs patching. This transforms silence from something threatening into something sacred. It becomes the background against which authentic love is revealed. Examples of this language appear in daily life. A couple walking hand in hand under the night sky, speaking little but feeling everything, partners reading side by side, each immersed in their own world yet deeply attuned to each other's presence. A shared glance across a crowded room carrying more intimacy than any public declaration. None of these moments require words, because the silence itself is eloquent. It tells of a bond that does not need explanation. This intimacy born of silence reflects the archetype of the sage or wise one. Wisdom understands that words, though powerful, have limits. Silence, when honored, reveals truths that cannot be argued or explained. A woman who embraces this form of connection shows that she is at peace with herself, and that peace allows her to create bonds rooted in authenticity. Her silence invites others into a depth that noisy relationships can never reach. The paradox is that the less is spoken, the more is felt. In silence, masks fall away. The absence of verbal decoration forces presence to stand on its own, and when presence is genuine, it speaks louder than the most eloquent speech. This is why silence in its purest form creates a level of intimacy that words often weaken. It is not emptiness, but essence, not absence, but union. Ultimately, when silence becomes a language of love, it teaches the most profound truth of all. That connection is not built on constant explanation, but on shared being. The woman who trusts silence as part of intimacy discovers that the greatest declarations of love may never be spoken. They are lived. And in those wordless moments, love reveals itself as what it was always meant to be, less about saying and more about being.